Office for Social Concerns at the Diocese, and when we can get them, members of the Catholic Medical Association. Unfortunately, we don't have a doctor with us tonight, but Beth will stand in and knows most of the things that our doctors would tell you tonight. We wanted to host these information nights to do a number of things. First, we wanted to explain the process for amending the Ohio Constitution by ballot initiative, what's required and when. Second, we wanted to identify groups like ours that are opposed to this particular proposed constitutional amendment. And we also wanted to identify groups on the other side that are pushing for its passage. Third, we wanted to describe what the proposed constitutional amendment says. And what it says is one thing. Fourth, we wanted to sift through what it says to get to what it actually does. Because the proposed constitutional amendment uses pretty vague language that can be interpreted in a number of ways. And if you sift through that language, you understand the breadth and depth of what the opponents of life are trying to do with this amendment. And then lastly, we wanted to identify what you can do, both now and in the future, to oppose this anti-life, anti-legislative, and anti-common good effort. Now, I spent probably, as Jeff said, a better portion of 30 years kind of immersed in Catholic social teaching, so I always like to have an opportunity to share a little of that. Wow.
We have a request for more lights.
No,
Okay.
I just thought, do you guys want lights so you can see the literature? Because we can still see the presentation board, would you rather be off? Because it doesn't really go halfway. Anybody say, put it back off?
On is good.
We're going to put it on the ballot, okay? So.
So most of us here tonight have a particular understanding of the human person, and we get that understanding from two sources. We get it from reason and from revelation. And that understanding is that we were created by God in God's image and likeness and called to an eternal relationship with Him. And as a result of that fact, our lives are sacred, and we possess an inalienable dignity from the moment of conception to natural death. Our fundamental rights, the real ones, come from that dignity. They flow from that fundamental dignity, inalienable dignity of being created in God's image. And of paramount importance is the right to life, which is the necessary condition for the exercise of every other right. Now, some of you may think this is just about politics, but it's about a lot more than that. As believers, we're citizens of two cities, the earthly city and the heavenly one. And part of our responsibilities are to organize the earthly city in such a way that persons are able to reach their ultimate goal or end. Their ultimate goal or end is really God Himself. Dorothy Day, who had started the Catholic worker movement in the last century, used to say that our job as Catholics was to make it easier for people to be good. So to reach any end depends in part on the conditions of the journey, right? And the Church recognizes that the sum total of the social conditions which allow people as individuals or groups to reach their end or goal is called the common good. And we have a book that the Vatican put out in 2005, got a copy of it over on the table there, and it's a compendium of the social doctrine of the Church. And in that compendium, it talks about who's responsible for the common good. And it says, besides individual persons being responsible for the common good, that responsibility belongs also to the state. Since the common good, its its promotion and defense is the reason that political authority exists. This proposed amendment does not serve the common good because it does not lead individuals or groups to their ultimate good. It alienates persons from themselves. It does not help people form networks of self-giving relationships. It does not protect the fundamental right to life. It does not support parents' rights. It fails to protect the most vulnerable. And it ignores the necessary conditions for a transcendent relationship with God. Now, since this proposed amendment does not serve the common good, it has no place in the Ohio Constitution. Remember, if this language is inserted in Ohio's Constitution, no legislation could contradict it or repeal it, and no court could ignore it. Only another Ohio constitutional amendment could overturn it. So, now, let's dive into the deep end and learn in a more detailed way how this proposed amendment operates and the ways that we can oppose it. So first off is my friend and colleague Jerry Freewald, Director of the Office for Social Concerns, who will tell us about the background of the proposed amendment, who's behind it, and how it began. Jerry will also speak to the process and the requirements necessary to put a proposed constitutional amendment on the ballot. So please join me now in welcoming Jerry to the podium.
Well, good evening, everyone. It's good to see everybody here today. And I just remember one of my first talks looking at the diocese many, many years ago. It was a different church, right? And I've been in this building for so many times. It's such a beautiful church, too. So it's good to see all of you tonight. So I'm not going to make you all legal scholars. I'm just going to give you some of this background about why we're here tonight. As many of you may know, abortion policy in the United States was covered under this umbrella of the U.S. Supreme Court decisions. In 1973, Roe versus Wade, Doe versus Bolton, and also there was another case later on, Planned Parenthood, Pennsylvania versus Casey. And so those Supreme Court decisions were pretty much the regulation that we operated under for many, many years. And it came under this false invention of a right to abortion in the United States based on the 14th Amendment due process clause. And so what happened was that, in Ohio we have abortion policy in terms of in the country, viability is this term you might hear about, around 20 weeks of pregnancy, where legislation can really may be able to save the unborn child after viability, and it's been hard to pass things beforehand. Well, so what happened in this Supreme Court decision this past summer, which is Dobbs versus Jackson Women's Health Organization, it really said that abortion is not in the Constitution. In fact, Roe and Casey were overruled in that decision because the Constitution makes no reference to abortion, and there's no such right implicitly protected by the constitutional provision, including what the arguments in support of Roe and Casey said that the due process clause of the 14th Amendment, there's this right. So really, what happened in this Dobbs decision is they left it up to elected bodies to determine policy, i.e. states. So I know that in the United States right now we have different states that are working on abortion regulation. There have been some constitutional amendments in some of these states that's happening, and here we are in the state of Ohio. Now in Ohio, there's a lot of different legislation that we have, and I know Beth's going to probably talk some about this later on, but we also have that was passed by the General Assembly called the Heartbeat Law. The Heartbeat Law really bans abortion after a detectable fetal heartbeat, which is about 6 weeks. Unfortunately, after that law was passed, is into courts, and it's still in the courts right now, and so it's not enforced right now. So we have some strong laws already in the state of Ohio, but there is a lobby, an abortion lobby that wants to change that, and there's a list of groups that are trying to stop what the progress we have made here in the state of Ohio to protect preborn children and their mothers and families. Those groups are Ohioans for Reproductive Freedom. So this group consists of the ACLU of Ohio, the Abortion Fund of Ohio, New Voices for Reproductive Justice Ohio, the Ohio Women's Alliance, Planned Parenthood, Advocates of Ohio, Preterm Cleveland, Pro-Choice Ohio, they used to be called NAWAL Ohio, and URGE. And they also, there's another organization called Ohio Physicians for Reproductive Rights, which only represents less than 4% of physicians in the state of Ohio. And so what they're trying to do is to propose a constitutional amendment to enshrine abortion, the right to abortion, so-called, in our Ohio Constitution. It's dangerous and it is extreme. And so what this will do, and again, Beth will go into more details, but this legislation, or this ballot initiative would erase the basic rights of parents. So parental rights are at stake with this proposed constitutional amendment. It would jeopardize basic health and safety protections for patients when it comes to abortions. And it would allow painful late-term abortions even after 15 weeks, right up until the moment of birth. Again, the language is vague and can be interpreted in many different ways. So this is a very, very dangerous proposed constitutional amendment for the state of Ohio. Now, Ohio has, there's a couple different ways you can amend the Ohio Constitution. And so just remember, the Constitution is like our guiding document for Ohio, for our government, right? So you have the Constitution, and then you have legislation, you have bills that are considered in the Ohio General Assembly. And so when we change the Constitution, remember we're changing what is a guiding document in the state of Ohio. And so there's two ways that this can happen. And so one way can happen through the Ohio General Assembly. They have to pass a resolution, a joint resolution, with 3/5 of the majority in each house to place a proposed amendment to the Constitution. Second way they can do this is through initiated citizen petition. And so, Ohio, the state of Ohio, has the second easiest way you can really do this behind California, right? And so this initiated petition is, so this is what is happening with this ballot initiative that is going to be possibly on our November election. And so what it means is that citizens can collect enough signatures to place it on the ballot. And so the number that they have to collect is about 415,000 signatures. And this really represents that the petitioners have to collect signatures that are at least 10% of the total vote cast statewide for governor in the November 8th, 2022 general election. And of those signatures that are collected, they must be collected from at least 44 of our 88 counties in the state of Ohio. And of each of those 44 counties, at least 5%, they have to collect signatures equal up to 5% of the total vote cast of governor in that county. So obviously, the groups that are trying to collect signatures have to be very tactical in how many they have to collect and where they collect those signatures from. And you may have seen some people maybe at the library. I just saw somebody today who saw somebody at a library. They were collecting signatures. And these signature collectors, and Beth will talk more about this again, but some of them are from Ohio, some of them from out of state. And many of them get paid per signature. And actually they get paid pretty well per signature when they collect them, and they have a per diem, all kinds of things that will, because they have to collect these signatures, and their goal is to collect probably around 700,000 signatures. Because what happens is, they have to collect all these signatures by July the 5th. So that's a date that you have in mind. July the 5th, all these signatures have to be collected. And then, once the signatures are collected, then there's this whole process that involves the Secretary of State and the State Ballot Board and the local boards of election to kind of weed out the signatures that are invalid. And they can be invalid for multiple reasons. One could be you're not a registered voter, or you're not from the county, or so there might be different ways that you're invalid. So what happens is there's going to be a time in the beginning around August when they find out whether they have enough signatures. If they do not have enough signatures, they then have 10 days to attempt to collect enough signatures to place it on the ballot. So that's why they're really trying to get 700,000 or more signatures so they don't have to do that process, go back to collect additional signatures. So what will happen once that's placed on the ballot, then you're going to see this a bunch of lawsuits happening and a lot of legal maneuvering to try to fight it. But the bottom line is, if they do have enough ballot signatures and they go through the court process, the goal for these organizations is to have it on the November general election ballot for consideration for the state of Ohio. And so what is happening at this point is to pass a constitutional amendment at the state level right now, according to our Constitution, you need to have, to pass it with 50% plus one. Okay, so that's the threshold for passing a constitutional amendment in the state of Ohio. You may have heard that there's a possible change that's being considered to change our Constitution. The Ohio General Assembly did pass, what I mentioned before, a joint resolution in both houses of the General Assembly, and the intent is to change the Constitution to require 60% of the electorate in order to pass a ballot initiative. And so that process is happening now. There's obviously some legal maneuvering happening in court and all that, but it was passed by the General Assembly. And the intent is to have this election on August the 8th. And so there's going to be a special election on August the 8th for citizens of Ohio to come together to decide whether they want to have the Constitution require 60%. So just think about, again, when we're talking about this, and people of goodwill, they can disagree about the percentages and the Constitution and all that, but just keep in mind that when you are trying to pass a constitutional amendment, it is written down on paper. People get to pass it. When they're trying to pass a bill in the General Assembly, so what happens is there's a bill that's introduced by a sponsor, co-sponsors, a bunch of those who are supporting this legislation. It goes through a committee process, right? And through the committee process, people testify and hearings, and they say, well, this bill is pretty good, but it has a couple little problems, right? Did you consider this? And sometimes, I've seen it over and over again. Sometimes even the sponsors are like, wow, it's a draft. This is a draft, and there's some revisions, so there's some amendments that they considered, that the sponsor said, I didn't think about that. That's a great idea. I'm going to amend my bill, or the committee's going to amend the bill and try to get it passed. When you have a ballot initiative, you can't do that, right? I mean, in order to change what has been passed, you have to have another, process like an election, which costs millions of dollars to do. So again, the guiding documents, the Constitution, and the Ohio Revised Code, which can be revised as corrected as we journey through and learn more about the different and adapt to the changes that are happening in our society. There's a big difference, and so that's why you're seeing in the news that changing the threshold to 60% is a big deal. Changing the Constitution is maybe should be more difficult to kind of change than maybe some legislation. So anyway, that's some background about and there's a lot of there's a coalition of farmers, there's a coalition of businessmen, there's a coalition of sportsmen, there's a lot of different coalitions that are coming together, even some pro-life organizations who are saying we're supporting this initiative to increase the percentage to 60%. So now Beth is going to talk a little bit about some background in terms of the revised code, and then really go into the details of the legislation or the proposed amendment language itself.
Thanks, Jerry. How's everyone doing tonight? So good to be here and to see so many friends. As Mark and Jerry said, my name is Beth Beaverboy. I'm not a physician. I'm standing in the place of one tonight. But part of what we want to do with these meetings is to assure everyone, before we get started, that in the state of Ohio, in the pro-life community, we want to help pregnant women and children. And that includes pregnant women who are experiencing a medical emergency. So there is an awful lot of misinformation out there telling people that if we do not adopt this amendment in November, women who are experiencing miscarriage in the state of Ohio will not be able to get miscarriage care. That if a woman is experiencing an ectopic pregnancy, we will not be able to help her. And if a woman is experiencing a medical condition like eclampsia or preeclampsia, the doctors will not be able to help her until she and her baby are both dead. This is an absolute lie. And usually Dr. Mike Parker is standing here telling you that as a practicing OBGYN who can talk about thousands of women that he has seen over his career, but also the thousands of women who they never talk about, which are the thousands of women he sees as an OBGYN hospitalist who are experiencing significant and severe complications from abortions. So before we get started, I want to say very clearly, induced abortion is very different than treating a miscarriage. And the Ohio Revised Code recognizes that. Ohio differentiates between abortions and the treatment of ectopic pregnancies. In fact, the abortion statutes in Ohio all refer to an intrauterine pregnancy, a pregnancy in the uterus. An ectopic, by definition, is outside of the uterus. And Ohio law gives doctors wide discretion to take action to protect the life and the health of a pregnant woman, even when doing so means the great tragedy that her baby cannot survive. But I want to be very clear with you all. When we are talking about, I feel like I can't see people over here. When we are talking about induced abortion, we are talking about the intentional destruction of innocent human life through poisoning, dismemberment, crushing, That is very different than what doctors do every day, even when they cannot save both a mom and a baby. Because even when you have a miscarriage or a stillbirth, or a baby that has to be delivered because of mom's medical emergency, we believe that that baby deserves to be treated with respect and dignity, not like medical waste. And so if you take anything from this talk tonight, I want you to take two things. One, this amendment is dangerous and too extreme. And two, that pro-life Ohioans and pro-life Americans are 100% committed to protecting and saving as many lives as we can, including moms. And so that's why for many of you who walked in the room, you might have picked up a four-fold piece of paper. If you didn't get one and you would like one, if you kind of raise your hand, Nate over here. And just to recognize, this is Nate. He is actually with the Protect Ohio campaign, which is our coalition dedicated to defeating this amendment. So we should get, and Nate's probably put 5,000 miles on his car in the last 2 months, and I might be underestimating it. But if we could recognize Nate real fast and give him a round of applause. He's one of our absolutely phenomenal team members. But the reason that we created this document, and if you need one, raise your hand and we'll kind of bring one over. The reason I needed this document, and if you're looking at it, it's a lot of words. It's a lot of words. I get it. But it's a lot of words that if you are interested, you can go back and refer to. Because what is happening over and over again is that our side is saying, this is not true, that women cannot get care for miscarriage. This is not true that women cannot get care in medical emergencies. And by the way, it is true that this proposal will do all of these bad things. And the other side is saying, that's not true. And the media is repeating them and saying, that's not true. And so we put this piece together because we want you, if you want to be able to have something to take home, not to become a constitutional scholar, not to become a professional pro-life apologetics person, not for any reason other than if we're always called to be able to defend our faith, right? We have to be able to defend our political beliefs, and we have to be able to defend what we are saying about this constitutional amendment, or this proposed constitutional amendment. Because what I am about to tell you, ladies and gentlemen, is wild. And every time I give this talk, somebody comes up to me and says, I can't believe it's that bad. So what I'm going to do is not particularly sophisticated. All I'm going to do is go through the actual constitutional amendment itself and read it to you in a way that you may not be accustomed to reading if you're not dealing with legislation or constitutional amendments or contracts. If I have any lawyers in the room, they'll know exactly what I'm talking about. Because when we read the revised code, it doesn't matter what you intended. It doesn't matter what you meant. It doesn't matter how you felt. It doesn't matter how your friends voted. All that matters is what it says. And what this proposed amendment says is horrific. So let's get started. Right off the bat, be it resolved by the people of Ohio to amend Article 1, Section 22 of the Ohio Constitution. So the first thing I want you to understand is that Article 1, Section 22, Article 1 is the equivalent of the Bill of Rights. And if you can't see up here, if you open that, it's right in there. I printed the exact language for you. Article 1 is the equivalent of the Bill of Rights. So in the state of Ohio, that is our fundamental rights. That's where you find things like freedom of religion. That's where you find things like the First Amendment, the right to self-defense, the right to private property, the right to protect yourself, the right to an education. That's in Article 1. And they're putting this in here to indicate that the right to reproductive decision-making is now a fundamental right. And I will tell you, fundamental rights tend to come with governmental funding. Don't they? So when we say that this will bring you taxpayer-funded abortion, this is why. Because we are recognizing reproductive decision-making as a fundamental right in the state of Ohio. So then we just go down a little bit. And it says every individual. Notice it doesn't say every adult. A big part of our campaign has been pointing out that this amendment is going to emaciate parental rights in the state of Ohio. And again, they're saying that's not true. In fact, it was really funny. On April 18th, I believe, there was an article in the Columbus Dispatch, and they talked to 4 constitutional scholars, asking them what they felt about our premise that this would undermine parental rights. 2 of them agreed with us. 1 of them said, that's not going to happen. And 1 of them, a law professor from the University of California at Berkeley or Davis, said, well, what they're saying is plausible, but it probably won't happen because Ohio has a conservative Supreme Court. So 3 out of 4 law professors agreed with us. And the headline in the Dispatch in the Cincinnati Enquirer read, legal scholars acknowledge parental rights won't be impacted. It was 1. It was 1, and this is what we are facing, which is why we are giving you so many words. It's why we are here tonight. So every individual, not every adult, every individual has the right to make and carry out one's own reproductive decisions. Okay? So keep that. Including but not limited to. Well, let me tell you something. Whenever you see the words including but not limited to, your spidey senses should go out. Because it means one of 2 things. It means either they have a list of things that they intend to pursue, and they are not going to tell them all, because as soon as you know, you'll oppose it. Reason number 2 is they know they want to expand it, but they haven't figured out how far they can go. And the example on this that I have been using, if any of you have college-age children, and they come home and they say, Mom, Dad, could I have $100? And you say, sure, what's it for? And they say, well, I'm going to use it for college purposes, including but not limited to books and study aids. You know it's beer money, don't you?
Yep.
Including but not limited to is one of the first massive ways that they are going to ramrod a list of horrific things on Ohioans through this amendment, and then eventually through the courts. So then they go on to list 5 of them, contraception being number 1. Well, let me tell you, people in Ohio and anywhere do not have a problem accessing contraception. In fact, the federal government is suing nuns who are like 80 years old because they won't buy contraception. Ohio's Constitution doesn't need to guarantee the right to contraception. The second, fertility treatment. Setting aside the fact that most people in this room are probably Catholics and the teachings of the church have some real grave concerns with certain fertility treatments, we also acknowledge that there are so many parents out there, so many people out there who are desperate to be parents. And I acknowledge that. But keep in mind that guaranteeing as a constitutional right fertility treatments doesn't just mean that you have the right to access NFP or NAPRO or even IVF. It also probably applies to surrogacy for same-sex couples or the Kardashians of the world. If you have a right to fertility. The third, continuing one's own pregnancy, to which I can only say, duh, right? We don't need a constitutional amendment for that. The next one is miscarriage care. Nobody is going after miscarriage care. And the only reason that there is any question about this is because of the hysterics of activists and the media who are telling people that women can't get miscarriage care and making doctors nervous to provide it. So then women don't get miscarriage care and then they say, see, look what just happened. But that is malpractice, not a genuine legal problem. And I will be the first one to say, and I'm going to guess that Mark and Jerry would be there, if we had a legitimate problem getting women miscarriage care in the state of Ohio, the pro-life community would be the first ones lined up to demand we fix it. I guarantee it. And the fifth one is and abortion. Okay? So abortion finally gets its shout out all the way at the bottom. Plus the things they're not talking about, whatever reproductive decisions are. And we happen to believe that reproductive decisions means anything that affects your, I don't know, reproductive system. So how could that logically not include sterilizing children with puberty blockers? Sex reassignment surgery that requires a complete hysterectomy. And in fact, on Monday, Planned Parenthood made this massive announcement. Planned Parenthood of Greater Ohio made a massive announcement that they are expanding their gender-conforming treatments, including not just hormones, but also things like STI testing and birth control. But yet they are shouting from the rooftops that gender-affirming care that could mess with your reproductive parts is different than the reproductive decisions in this, except for when it's not because it's birth control. It's astonishing that they are getting away with it. I could never get away with it. So that's the first section, Section A. And again, keep in mind when you're reading legislation, when you're reading constitutional amendments, and before I came to Greater Columbus Right to Life, I did this for like 15 years. I passed 3 constitutional amendments, and I will note that all of them passed, one of them passed with 64%, and 2 of them passed with 72%. So it is possible to pass a constitutional amendment with more than 60% of the vote, if it's done right. So you have to read it line by line and section by section. So that's Section 1, or A. Section B, the state. And I'm going to pause here because the next little political lesson I'm going to teach you is the devil is always in the definition. It's always in the definition. You want to know what a law or a statute or a bill does, go read the definition sections. And we already have this problem in the abortion world, right? Because abortion has 3 different meanings. It has the meaning that we use when we talk about induced abortion, which is the intentional destruction of an innocent unborn human child. We have the medical or veterinary medical terminology, which is just any pregnancy that does not result in a live birth. And then we have a legal definition, which is some hodgepodge of those. So how we define words matters. So here, we're just going to go down to the definition section, and it says state includes any governmental entity and any political subdivision. So the state here does not mean the governor, it doesn't mean the General Assembly. Or it does mean that, but it's not limited to that. It also means your publicly funded universities, your publicly funded hospitals, your public schools, your townships, your county commissioners, maybe even your publicly funded libraries. Any governmental entity and any political subdivision. So keep that in mind, and let's just go back up to the state. The state shall not directly or indirectly burden, penalize, prohibit, interfere with, or discriminate against. And I've got to tell you, everything that the government does, directly or indirectly, burdens, penalizes, prohibits, interferes with, or discriminates against. Anyone pay their taxes recently and think about how it definitely interfered with vacation? Right? That is an incredibly broad, and not just broad, intentionally broad phrase. And in fact, I would argue that it actually raises this reproductive decision right above how we understand the First Amendment rights, freedom of speech and freedom of religion. Because when you talk about those rights, it's that the government shall not unduly burden them. Which is why I can't shout fire in a crowded theater, right? There's a limit to the free speech. It's why I can't talk about bombs at the airport. There's a limit. There is some restriction. It's why I can't start the religion of sacrificing 43-year-old women and say that I can kill people because it's my religion. It's because that right is that the government cannot unduly burden. This is a much more shocking standard. It cannot directly or indirectly burden, penalize, interfere with, or prohibit. That is a very, very high hurdle. And it's why we say that this is going to result in almost every life-affirming, health and safety protecting, child and family preserving law that could possibly be related to reproductive decision making. It's terrifying. So what is it that they're not allowed to interfere with, burden, discriminate against, etc.? One, an individual, again not an adult, an individual's voluntary exercise of this right, this as to be determined reproductive right, or any person or entity that assists an individual in exercising that right. Okay? So think what that means. That means your public school nurse, your coach, your neighbor, or the weirdo your kid met on the internet. The state cannot stop them from assisting your child in pursuing whatever reproductive decision they want to make. Unless, and so this is what they throw in here to try to look reasonable. Unless the state demonstrates that it is using the least restrictive means necessary in order to advance the individual's health in accordance with widely accepted and evidence-based standards. So keep in mind, do you know who writes the accepted and evidence-based standards of an abortion doctor? Abortion doctors. Of gender therapy. So the only thing that the state can do to regulate or limit is to do things that advance the desired outcome. Do you see that? It actually forces the state into helping these things advance. So they may be able to require that your abortion provider use sterile instruments. But we certainly are going to have a hard time arguing that it has to be a physician handing out the abortion pill to your child. And I'm saying these things not to terrify you. Somebody a couple of weeks ago emailed me and said, Beth, I couldn't sleep. I am not saying these things to terrify you. I am saying these things to arm you. Because they are coming. And they're coming for our children and our families. And then you get down to section C, more definitions. Sorry. However, abortion can be prohibited after fetal viability, but in no case can such an abortion be prohibited if in the professional judgment of the pregnant person, they can't even say woman, of the pregnant person's treating physician, It is necessary to protect the patient's life or health. Okay? I'm going to read to you an interview that was in last Monday, I think. Oh, it just went away. It was in the Atlantic. It was an interview with a doctor from Colorado named Warren Kern. And I'm just going to read it. During the conversation and the ones following it, I prodded for cracks in Hearn's certainty about abortion. At one point, I thought I'd found one. He told me about a woman who'd sought an abortion because she didn't want to have a baby girl. I thought he had refused. But when I followed up to ask him why, I learned that I had misunderstood. He had done the abortion for sex selection twice. Once for this woman and once for someone who'd wanted a girl. It was their choice to make, he explained. So the interviewer asks, so if a pregnant woman with no health issues comes into the clinic at 30 weeks, what would you do? The question irked him. Every pregnancy is a health issue. There is a certified risk of death from being pregnant, period. That's the professional judgment of the pregnant person. I can't even say woman. The pregnant person's physician. And then they say, oh, but they can prohibit it after fetal viability. But by the way, the doctor determines fetal viability and what that means. These are loopholes that are so large, we could drive a Stericycle truck through them. And if you don't know what a Stericycle truck is, that's the truck that comes usually on Thursdays to Planned Parenthood to haul away the fetal remains. So if they are effective, what is at stake? If they succeed, we will have abortion on demand through all 9 months of pregnancy, including painful and cruel abortions late in pregnancy on perfectly healthy babies. And make no mistake, pregnancies that happen, there's this big lie out there that if women have abortions late in pregnancy, it's because of a medical emergency or a fetal abnormality. Their own literature tells you the main reason women have abortions after the point of viability is because they weren't sure, indecision. They weren't sure what they wanted to do, and it took them that long to decide. The second most common reason is it took them that long to raise the money. This is going to end Ohio's law prohibiting partial birth feticide, which we sometimes call partial birth abortion. That's where they turn the baby upside down in a move that's dangerous for mom's health, deliver it feet first, up to the chin, and then sever its spinal cord at the neck so that it's not living when it comes out. That will no longer be enforceable in Ohio. It's going to eliminate the requirement that parents be involved, notified, provide consent before children engage in life-altering procedures like abortion, sterilization, hormone therapy. In fact, I think today there was testimony on this issue at the State House on what to do with transgender children. And a mom said the government shouldn't interfere with the decisions. That's the same language they're using. No government interference. We're going to see the elimination of critical health and safety provisions that protect unborn children and women. And I think we're going to risk religious freedom and conscience protections on any matter required or determined to fall under the umbrella. If you read in the section on the intersectionality of reproductive rights and gender theory, you'll see that a major law firm that is promoting legislation like this articulates that in order to have reproductive freedom, The state needs to use its enforcement powers against third parties who interfere with women seeking, or individuals seeking those rights. That means churches and pregnancy centers, and it's already happening in California and Michigan. I'm not saying these things to be scary, but to let you know what is at stake. And you don't have to believe me. Whenever I talk to young girls, I tell them, particularly when it's a young man, when he tells you who he is, listen. When someone tells you who they are, listen to them. And they brag about these things. Preterm, Ohio's late-term abortion facility up in Cleveland, brags on their website that in 1976, they worked with the ACLU to defeat Ohio's first parental consent law. Both of those are part of the coalition pushing this amendment. Just Google the phrase, repro rights are trans rights. It's in there. It is absolutely in there. All you have to do is a basic news search that somehow is blocked from every media company in Ohio, but it works on my computer. And this has continued. In 1985, Ohio had a Republican House and a Democratic Senate and a Democratic Governor Celeste. And that's when we passed the first version of Ohio's current parental consent law. In 1985, in 1990, the ACLU took it all the way to the US Supreme Court where it was upheld. And other states followed our model. Does anybody there's what we call the laugh test sometimes in politics. Does anybody genuinely believe that they are coming into Ohio and spending 30, 40, 50, 60 million dollars to put this fraud of an amendment into our Constitution, and they don't intend to eliminate the thing they've been going after for 50 years? Of course they do. And so the reason that we're doing all of these meetings, and thank you for coming out tonight, because it is beautiful outside. And I know there are baseball games and flowers to water and naps and hammocks to take. But it is so important that you are here tonight. And that you take this message with you and you talk to 10 people. And you just listen to them. Because you don't have to memorize every detail in that. You don't even have to make them as completely committed to the pro-life stance as I am. And trust me, people think I'm insane. I left a pretty sweet gig lobbying to do this. Right? And a lot of people think and still think I'm crazy. I am a little crazy. If you know me, I think it's adorable, but endearing is the word we use. But the reality is that this is important. And if we thought 50 years under Roe v. Wade was bad, just wait until Ohio's Constitution means that we have to stand by. Not only to refer to the days when Ohio had 40 or 50,000 abortions a year, but we have to stand by idly with 32, 34, 36-week abortions on perfectly healthy babies. Government funded.
By your tax dollars. Thank you very much.
So we have to get out and we have to do things. And the reason that we're taking this show on the road is to invite you all to do 3 things. The first is to pray. Prayer and fasting are crucial. And I've seen it in Columbus. In the past 11 years, we have seen abortions go down by nearly 50%. We've seen 5 abortion clinics close. Do you know what was true of all of those places? They were all places where we took consistent, prayerful, peaceful presence. You can almost see it happen. You can almost see it happen. But we also need you to get involved. There will be actions through every parish. I think that information continues to come down. Obviously, you have the information from the Catholic Conference, you have the prayer cards, but it's going to get real, it's going to get real intense. But if you're not engaged with us at Greater Columbus Right to Life, if you're interested in volunteering, we actually have paid door-to-door positions if we can't hire enough people. So if you know someone age 16 or older who's looking to make, I don't know, I think they're paying $18 or $20 an hour plus mileage to go door to door, just to talk to people about this amendment, maybe get in a little exercise, get involved, sign up with us to keep involved. But also continue to do all of the work that we're continuing to do to support our pregnancy centers and our moms, and all of the things that we're already doing so beautifully in the Catholic Church to walk with moms in need. And then last but not least, we need financial support. I'm here and able to do this because of the generosity of our donors, for which I thank you. Mark and Jerry and the work they do is funded through the appeal, formerly known as the Bishop's Annual Appeal. So think of these things, because I gotta tell you, in order for us to have a chance, in order for us to come close, to make it, we're gonna need to raise $50 to $60 million. And that's a lot of money. In fact, people are already predicting that this could become the most expensive and the most brutal political campaign in Ohio history, if not in the US. And when we all survived the Vance riding commercials of last year, so we know what that means. And I gotta be honest with you, the thought that we're gonna spend 120 million on both sides to either push this or defeat it, it makes me sick. Because I think about the amazing things that we could do to help women and children and families in this state with that much money. But I don't care. And so I'm going out and I'm joining the Protect Women Ohio campaign, and we're raising the money for people. For some people it's $5 and $50, and for some people it's $50,000. Because to my mind, it's worth it. Because I don't want to stand on the sidelines and pray and do nothing more than pray, if they even allow that, like England is. While 32-week women are going in because they don't want a baby girl. Because children talk about regretting their sterilization and the medical problems they're having when they got gender therapy without mom and dad knowing. And so it's worth it. So we're gonna be I'm asking for more money than I've ever asked for. And I also wanna let people know, they are out in your community right now gathering signatures. You've probably seen them all over the place. If they come up to you, certainly decline to sign. But I gotta say, it's not the worst idea in the whole world to talk to them for a little while first. Because when they're talking to you, they're not talking to somebody else. Keep it around the clock, because I do this all the time naturally. I'll just keep talking and talking until people yawn. But you can also, if they're in a public place, you can actually stand there and you can talk to the people that they're talking to. And you can say, okay, you may not agree with me on abortion in the first trimester, but can you at least agree that Ohio should be able to have some health and safety laws and some restrictions on the third trimester? And in a certain way, it should be easier to defeat this because most people agree when they understand what's really going on. This is too far, it's too extreme, and it's too dangerous for Ohio. So certainly we want to continue to provide resources through us, Greater Columbus Right to Life. If you want more of the sheets, If you want any of the other resources that we're putting, you can go to our website, you can scan the QR code. The Catholic Conference is putting out tremendous things. They're going to be coming to the churches and through social concerns. Protect Women Ohio is doing great work. I don't know if any of you have seen the ads, particularly the Libby and Linda ads. Those are beautifully done. But we gotta reach people in the middle. I'm assuming that just about everybody in this room agrees with me. And I'll also say, if you don't agree with me, and you're just so politely and respectfully sitting here and listening, I appreciate that. You don't have to agree with me 100% to agree that this is too extreme. And I hope you join us in voting against it. And I am not as constrained as other people are, so I will say, on behalf of Greater Columbus Right to Life, I also hope that each and every one of you is not only registered to vote, check it, because if you've moved, you might need to update it. And we put some information out there. But that you're not afraid to go out and vote to raise the threshold. Because it's not just about abortion. We've seen this again and again over the last 15 years. We've seen it with animal rights activists trying to put farmers out of business like they've done in California. We've seen it with the casinos. We've seen it with medical marijuana. We're seeing it now with minimum wage. There's a group trying to get signatures to repeal sovereign immunity because they want to go after police officers. It's a legitimate issue. And even if you're not sure where you feel, register to be a poll worker because we desperately need those. So with that, we're just exactly at 1 hour after we started talking, which is always our goal. And certainly Mark, Jerry, and I can take some questions if you have any. Yes, ma'am.
How often is it amendment to the Constitution put in on the ballot? Is that
So her question is how frequently are amendments to the Constitution put onto the ballot? I don't know off the top of my head, but they're certainly becoming much more common in recent years. They're certainly becoming much more common in recent years. And keep in mind, Ohio also has the ability for the citizens to initiate statutory changes. And we've done that maybe 10 or 15 years ago. Remember when they did the smoking law? So you can't smoke in business places and bars and restaurants? That's not being touched at all. It's just the Constitution. It's just the Constitution.
Has anything like this happened in any other states?
Yes, and in fact, we're 7 and they're 7 and we're 0. I think the most similar example that you could look to is what happened just in Michigan with Proposition 3. A little different, but substantially the same. And we're always big fans of beating Michigan. This is just another excuse.
It's probably worth noting too, in the Michigan vote, Michigan's constitutional amendment passed by 57%. So kind of want to benchmark on what does 60 mean, what does 50 mean. Michigan's experience was 57. That was California. What's that? What was California?
It's probably like 92. Back here.
What is the likelihood that the 60% will be put into play, or will it remain?
Don't know. I mean, I don't even think the campaign formed a website yesterday. I think it's voteyesohio.org, but I could be wrong. I haven't seen any polling. But I can tell you that so the majority of states do not have this initiated constitutional amendment. And those which do, Ohio's the second easiest. So even in states like Nevada, which is not what I think of when I think of conservative policy, has a much more stringent requirement. You have to pass it at 2 elections. Is it Pennsylvania that requires 70%?
Yeah, like over 70% of Pennsylvania.
I need to get that, and just because people keep asking that question. But it's if you Google NCSL ballot initiative states, it'll be a great document. Yes, sir.
Thank you all. The first is, where else are you doing sessions and when, like this?
Oh.
So that we can share that.
Absolutely great question. So his question is, where else are we doing this? And we're traveling all over. If you, I didn't bring it. If you click on that QR code or go to our website, not that one, the one on the 4-pager, I'm making my assistant do all the QR codes. If you go there, you can see all of our upcoming events.
We're coming up to St. Patrick's sometime soon,
Yeah, we'll be at St. Patrick's, is it June 19th, maybe?
something like that.
We're taking a little bit, I'm gonna be speaking with some Pentecostals on Friday, next week. Well, yeah, you can find it, or even better, sign up for our newsletter and I'll send you an email with all of them.
Second question was, this is great, this piece. What precludes us from getting this inserted in every bulletin in the diocese?
Well, certainly, I think bulletin space is always an issue, and the Catholic Conference has put out really great pieces as well. We have a one-page version of that. Some churches, we have a Catholic version and a Protestant version. That would be kind of a decision on how the particular parish wanted to handle
It's
it.
on the website, I mean, my point is, it's really important, your message, and unfortunately, we've only got a fraction of the parish here tonight. And I think I think that's just something that would be, I would strongly, and I'm happy to see.
We had it on our website.
Yeah, oh, okay, it is on their website, and this is a great piece too, if you didn't see it.
But Mark, I'm suggesting that would be a great message from the diocese of the parishes, for them to get it out one way or the other.
Yeah, people are always able to beg, steal, borrow, we can reformat it, but again, you know, sometimes there's lots of things in play in that, but if I can help you out, and I know it's been a good day for you, so. Other Beth.
I have a question, since you're representing doctors tonight. I would like to be updated to know if there's any type of ethical guidelines the doctors are committed to as they go through med school, like the old Hippocratic oath of doing no harm?
Yes.
Is that alive and well, or is it gone?
So, great segue into something I forgot to mention. So Dr. Parker, along with I, are giving leadership to an organization called Do No Harm Ohio, which is a coalition of physicians, nurses, pharmacists, medical and healthcare providers that are going to be speaking out against this. Certainly at the political level, groups like the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists, they've definitely taken a political position that supports abortion. But we also have really great organizations like the APLOC, the American Association of Pro-Life OBGYNs, the Center for Hippocratic Medicine, the Christian Medical and Dental Association. And all of those people are standing up to say, look, we are pro-life not just because of our religion, but we are pro-life because practicing medicine this way, showing the dignity of our patients in this way, it conforms to what we think is true about science and the world and human nature. And so that's kind of why I get to stand in the place of the doctors, because I get to speak for them a little bit. But yeah, ACOG, APOG, CDM, those are all great organizations that are making that stance. But certainly, I'm hearing it, you know, I was at an event with the Women's Care Center, and there was this beautiful young couple that were in med school at the university in town. And they were ostracized by their peers because they weren't supporting it. We live in a culture that is committed to the destruction of the image of God. And so that's why I say it's coming after us, it's coming after our families, it's coming after our children, because they want to destroy the image of God, that human dignity that each of us is made in. And they want to destroy it and then build it into a vision of themselves. And that is, by the way, the definition of evil. Right? But the good news is, and this is why we start out all of our programs inviting people to pray with us, the perfect antidote to my body, my choice is something that is available right here which is, this is my body, which has been given for you. I'm still in Father's line now, but, right? But that's why it is so powerful and so important. Because I do want to leave each of you with some hope. We're still in the Easter season, and I have my Pentecost dress ready for Sunday. It has sequins. But we are Easter people. So we know, we have faith, we have the confidence that this is a battle already won. So what we are doing by being present here tonight is we are deciding what role we want to play. And I don't know about y'all, but I'm all in. So maybe one more question.
So are you planning on, or have you done any focus groups on how to attack this constitutional amendment proposal? The reason I ask is that in my view, this, including but not limited to reproductive decisions for an individual, includes a 10-year-old girl deciding she wants to have sexual intercourse with a 20-year-old man, and the state cannot prohibit that. And so would that provide us an avenue to attack this legislation? Because there are some people who are not pro-abortion, but they don't want to make the decision for somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
But if we say, look, this is going to legalize child sex acts with adults,
In the consequential abortion.
So the answer is yes. I mean, there's a lot of messaging that's being tested right now.
okay.
And I know in big,
Part of the coalition work.
Yeah, that's part, we have an excellent, so it's with a company called Swing State Strategies. A guy named Jordan, Mike Hartley is their head. And I'll tell you, so I was in politics for years and years, and I lost exactly one election. And I lost it to Mike Hartley. So we have an excellent team here in the state. We have wonderful partners and pro-life organizations all over the state, and we have tremendous national partners too. It's why Susan B. Anthony is involved. It's why all of these, because Ohio is so important. Because as goes Ohio, goes the nation. We are the flood wall. Because they were in 5 to 7 states last year, depending on how you count them. They're in Ohio this year. And if they, there's another, 9, 12, including Florida. They're now getting petitions for Florida. We have to stop them in Ohio. We have to stop them. Okay, I know I said last, but there was one over here who's really patient and behind the column, and I'm sorry.
Is this amendment going to actually make it legal for 10-year-old girls to have sex with 20-year-old men?
I don't know about that because that may be a little bit different than, that may be, so sexual activity as a criminal issue is slightly different than a reproductive issue. And I forgot, I'm going to back up here, I forgot the very last line of the constitutional amendment, section D. This section is self-executing, which means that it doesn't take the General Assembly to pass a law, repeal a law. They don't have to go to court and sue. All you have to do is say what I want to do, and it violates the constitutional amendment, and it becomes contingent on the government to prove it doesn't. So thanks for the reminder. But, sorry, I forgot that one. But, I mean, I would say the reality is that sometimes things are very true about proposed legislation and proposed amendments, but they're sometimes so broad and so horrific that it doesn't pass what we call the laugh test. And so you have to be careful not to go too far, like not to be the little boy that cried wolf, because we don't have to hypothesize. We can just read what they're trying to do. And certainly we know that the majority of Ohioans are not okay with these 3 principles. The first is repealing critical health and safety protections for women and unborn children. The second is demanding or facilitating abortion on demand through all 9 months of pregnancy, including painful and cruel procedures after 15 weeks, after 22 weeks, after 30 weeks. And last is cutting parents out of decisions before their minor children make life-altering decisions like abortion, like sterilization. And there is a reason, to get back to your question, that we're going to continue to talk about those three things. So with that, I know we have to kind of get up and get headed out. I thank you all. Mark or Jerry, do you have anything to add? We thank you all for your
Yep, Father Steve's here, Father Ted's here. Would one of you close us with a prayer and a blessing tonight? Sure.
In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, amen. Heavenly Father, we ask that you send the power of your Holy Spirit upon us and upon our church's efforts to protect life at all its stages, and to enable us to do what needs to be done to keep this amendment from passing. Instill in us an enthusiasm, such an enthusiasm for life, that we will encourage others with knowledge that we now have, share that knowledge, help people to get the facts so that they can make informed voting decisions. Bless us always in our efforts. We thank you for the gift of your speakers tonight. We ask you to bless them and their efforts as they go out. And let us pray together, asking this month of May for the intercession of our Blessed Mother, Mother of God, and the Mother of each one of us, to also intercede for our efforts as we pray together. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen. The Lord be with you. And with your spirit. Almighty God bless you, the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Go in peace. Thanks be to God. Thank you all for being here.